The cold morning air hung heavy over the fields near the Siler River, a thick mist curling over the grass and shrouding the world in a ghostly silence. The only sounds were the distant clatter of armor and the soft, nervous murmurs of men preparing for what could be their last sunrise. Spartacus sat tall before his men, his horse shifting anxiously beneath him, sensing the tension that electrified the air. His eyes swept over the faces of his followers, each one hardened by months of struggle and sacrifice. Across the valley, the Roman legion stood in perfect formation, their armor gleaming like a river of steel under the pale light of dawn. The rising sun caught the edges of their shields and spears, turning the valley into a sea of gold and iron. This was it, the final battle, the moment that would decide the fate of thousands. Every heartbeat seemed to echo with the weight of history. Spartacus had led his army of former slaves, gladiators, and desperate peasants across the length and breadth of Italy. They had marched through forests and over mountains, always pursued, always fighting for a freedom most had never dared to dream of. They had tasted victory and the sweet, fleeting promise of freedom. But now the full might of Rome, commanded by the ruthless Marcus Licinius Crassus, was here to crush them once and for all. The legions advanced with grim determination, their banners snapping in the cold wind. Spartacus knew the odds were impossibly stacked against them. The enemy outnumbered his forces, and their discipline was legendary. Yet, he refused to let fear show on his face. His army was a patchwork of brave souls, men and women from every corner of the empire, united by a single burning hope. They fought not for riches or glory, but for the dream of a world without masters, where no one would be born in chains. He looked into the faces of his followers, men and women who had known nothing but chains and whips, whose backs bore the scars of a lifetime of cruelty. Yet now, their eyes shone with resolve, transformed by the taste of freedom and the bonds of brotherhood forged in battle. Now, they stood as warriors, ready to die for the freedom they had briefly known. Each one was prepared to give everything for the cause, to fight until the very end. In a dramatic gesture, Spartacus dismounted, drew his sword, and killed his horse before the assembled army. The act sent a ripple of shock through the ranks, but also a surge of courage. "If we win," he declared, his voice ringing out over the silent field, "I will have many better horses. If we lose, I will not need one." His words cut through the fear, igniting a fire in the hearts of his followers. The message was clear. There would be no retreat, no surrender. They would stand together, whatever the cost. The Roman lines were a terrifying sight, legion after legion in perfect formation, their shields locked and spears bristling. The discipline and power of Rome was on full display, a machine built for conquest. Crassus had rebuilt the Roman army after its humiliating defeats, instilling brutal discipline and a thirst for vengeance. He demanded absolute loyalty and punished failure without mercy. His soldiers were fighting not just for victory, but to erase the shame of their previous defeats at the hands of slaves and gladiators. Their pride and honor were at stake. The ground trembled as Roman war machines, ballistae and catapults were rolled into position, their massive frames casting long shadows across the field. The rebels braced themselves for the onslaught to come. For Spartacus, this moment was the culmination of a long and bloody journey. He remembered the faces of friends lost, the countless battles fought, and the hope that had carried them this far. He had started as a gladiator in Capua, forced to fight for the amusement of others, but in that arena, he had found the spark of rebellion, igniting a fire that swept across Italy and shook the foundations of Rome itself. He had defeated consular armies, outwitted Roman generals, and led his people to victories that seemed impossible. Each triumph was a blow against the chains of oppression, but every victory made Rome more determined to destroy him. The Senate plotted revenge and the legions returned, stronger and more relentless each time. Now, cornered in the rugged hills of southern Italy, Spartacus and his followers prepared for their final stand. There was no escape, only the hope that their courage would be remembered. He was more than a man, he was a symbol of defiance, the leader of the largest slave revolt in Roman history. As the sun rose over the battlefield, Spartacus raised his sword one last time, ready to meet his fate and carve his name into legend. Spartacus's rebellion grew at an incredible rate after early victories, sending shockwaves through the Roman countryside. News of his triumphs spread quickly, inspiring hope among the oppressed and fear among the powerful. Slaves, shepherds, runaway servants, and poor farmers flocked to his cause, drawn by the promise of freedom and a chance to strike back at their oppressors. The movement became a beacon for those who had suffered under the Roman yoke for generations. What began as 70 desperate gladiators swelled into a massive force, as word spread and more people risked everything to join the uprising. The ranks grew daily, transforming a small band into a formidable army. At its peak, Spartacus's army numbered over 100,000 men, women, and children, a force unlike anything Rome had ever faced from within its own borders. It was a moving nation of the dispossessed, with women and children in tow, entire families abandoning their homes to seek safety and hope among the rebels. The camp became a bustling, makeshift city on the move. Blacksmiths worked tirelessly to repair and forge weapons from whatever materials they could find. Cooks prepared meals for the hungry masses and healers tended the wounded, creating a sense of community and resilience in the face of hardship. The rebels became experts in guerrilla warfare, striking Roman patrols and raiding supply lines with daring and cunning. Their knowledge of the land gave them an edge, allowing them to outmaneuver the better-equipped Roman forces. Spartacus proved a brilliant military leader, training his diverse followers into an effective fighting force. He instilled discipline and unity, turning a ragtag group into a disciplined army capable of challenging Rome itself. The success of the rebel army shocked the Roman elite, who had never imagined that slaves and peasants could pose such a threat. Panic and disbelief spread through the Senate as reports of defeat mounted. The Senate initially underestimated the threat, sending small, poorly coordinated forces that Spartacus outsmarted and defeated time and again. Each Roman setback emboldened the rebels further. Each victory brought more recruits and confidence to the rebel cause. The army's morale soared, and the dream of freedom seemed within reach for the first time. However, managing such a diverse group was challenging. Disagreements and tensions often flared, as people from different backgrounds struggled to find common ground. The army was a mix of cultures and languages, united against Rome but divided in purpose. Some dreamed of escape, others of revenge, and a few even hoped to build a new society. Yet, for a time, their shared struggle held them together. As the rebellion continued, the once solid unity among the gladiators began to fracture. Spartacus, the charismatic and visionary leader, was at the helm, but other powerful figures emerged, each with their own ambitions and ideas. Crassus, a fierce Gaul warrior, was one such figure. He disagreed with Spartacus's grand strategy. Spartacus envisioned a bold plan to march north, cross the formidable Alps, and lead his people to freedom beyond the reach of Rome. However, Crassus and his followers had a different vision. They wanted to remain in Italy, exploiting the chaos to plunder Roman towns and villages. This fundamental disagreement led to a tragic split within the ranks of the rebellion. Crassus, taking with him a substantial force of 30,000 men, broke away from the main army, seeking his own path. The Roman Senate, ever watchful, saw this division as a golden opportunity to strike. Crassus's army soon encountered a well-prepared Roman force near Mount Garganus, where they were tragically annihilated. The defeat was a brutal blow to the rebellion, a stark reminder of the cost of disunity. In a somber tribute to his fallen comrade, Spartacus forced Roman prisoners to fight to the death, honoring Crassus's memory in a grim spectacle. Despite the loss of a significant portion of his army, Spartacus demonstrated his tactical brilliance by defeating both consular armies sent against him. Yet the cracks in the rebellion were now painfully exposed, threatening the very foundation of their cause. The dream of a united front, once so vibrant and strong, was now shattered into pieces. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty as the rebellion faced increasing challenges. The rebellion's strength was waning, and the once mighty force was now a shadow of its former self, struggling to survive against the relentless Roman pursuit. With consular armies defeated, the Roman Senate was in panic. Marcus Licinius Crassus stepped in, seeking military glory. Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome, funding his own army. He restored discipline with harsh methods, including decimation. Crassus forged his legions into a relentless killing machine. Unlike previous commanders, Crassus was methodical and patient. He shadowed the rebel army, cutting off supply lines. This war of attrition frustrated the rebels. The dynamic of the war changed. Spartacus was now on the defensive. Crassus's pressure pushed the rebels further south. The rise of Crassus marked the beginning of the end. Spartacus had finally met his match. Trapped in southern Italy, Spartacus devised a daring plan. He aimed to escape to Sicily, a hotbed of unrest. Spartacus negotiated with Cilician pirates for transport. The pirates agreed, but they were treacherous. The promised fleet never appeared, leaving the rebels stranded. The betrayal was devastating. The rebels were cornered, with the sea in front and Crassus behind. The hope of Sicily was drowned in the Strait of Messina. The betrayal sealed their fate. They faced the full wrath of Crassus. Crassus constructed a massive wall across Rhegium. The wall was a formidable barrier, trapping the rebels. Crassus aimed to starve them into surrender. Winter set in, and conditions became desperate. Hunger and disease took a toll on the trapped army. Spartacus refused to surrender to despair. He organized a daring escape during a storm. A portion of the army breached the wall. The breakout was a success, but came at a high cost. The army was fractured once again. Spartacus led a smaller, desperate force into the final chapter. The end was near after the breakout. Spartacus gathered his forces for one last battle. The rebels were outnumbered but determined to fight. Spartacus killed his horse, signaling a fight to the death. He launched a ferocious attack toward Crassus. Spartacus fought bravely, cutting down centurions. Despite his effort, the Roman legions held. Spartacus was wounded and eventually killed. With their leader gone, the rebel resistance collapsed. The battle turned into a massacre. The dream of freedom died with Spartacus. The rebellion was crushed. The defeat at the Scylla River was not the end. Crassus ordered 6,000 captured rebels crucified. The Appian Way became a grotesque forest of dying men. This brutal act served as a warning to all slaves. The fear it inspired ensured no revolt of this scale would happen again. Crassus won the war but was denied a triumph. Pompey claimed credit, creating a rivalry with Crassus. For the dead on the Appian Way, political games were meaningless. Though his rebellion was crushed, Spartacus became a symbol. Roman historians wrote about him with respect. He was seen as a leader who fought for a noble cause. Spartacus became an icon for revolutionaries. His story resonated with those fighting oppression. In modern times, his legend is immortalized in films and books. The film Spartacus captures the spirit of defiance. His story reminds us that legends of the vanquished endure. Spartacus's legacy is one of an unbreakable spirit. His rebellion poses a timeless question: what makes people risk everything for freedom? How are legends born from the ashes of defeat?